Johannesburg's streets buzzed with life, but inside the small corner restaurant, Zanelle's world felt heavy. She moved from table to table with practiced speed, balancing trays, forcing polite smiles at customers who barely looked at her. Some were impatient, some outright rude, and her manager, Mr. Dlamini, barked orders without mercy. Every hour felt longer than the last, yet she pushed through because she had no choice. Her younger brother lay at home, too weak to work, and every rand she earned went toward his medicine, food, and rent. At the end of each shift, she sat in the back carefully counting every coin, stretching it in her mind to see if it could cover another week. That evening, as the dinner rush slowed, Zanelle carried a tray of plates toward the kitchen. She passed the large front window and caught sight of someone standing outside. Her eyes lingered. A man, tall but hunched against the wind, stood by the glass. His clothes were torn and faded, his shoes barely holding together. His face was gaunt, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, and his hands were tucked deep into his pockets as if hiding from the cold. He wasn't looking inside with greed, just quiet hunger, like someone too tired to hope. Zanelle felt a tug in her chest. She knew that look. It was the same one she saw in her brother's eyes when he tried to hide his pain. A customer called her name, snapping her back to work. But as she cleared tables, her mind kept drifting to the man outside. He didn't move, didn't beg, didn't even meet the stares of passers-by. He simply waited, as if time had no meaning. When her eyes met his again through the glass, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding of struggle, of nights that felt endless. She didn't know his name or his story, but she knew one thing: he was hungry. And no matter what rules her manager had, she couldn't turn away. She carried the last tray to the kitchen, her heart already deciding what her hands would soon do. The night air outside was sharp, the kind that made breath turn into mist. Zanelle glanced through the window again and saw the man still there, his shoulders trembling under the thin, torn jacket. Something in her chest tightened. She glanced toward the kitchen where Mr. Dlamini was busy counting the day's cash, his eyes fixed on the till. She knew the rules. Nothing left the kitchen without being paid for. But she also knew she couldn't just watch him suffer. She moved quickly, wrapping a piece of bread, a warm portion of stew, and some rice into a takeaway box. Her hands worked fast, her ears alert for the sound of Mr. Dlamini's footsteps. With the box hidden under her apron, she slipped out through the side door into the cold. The man looked up as she approached, his eyes cautious but gentle. "Here," she whispered, pressing the warm box into his hands. "It's not much, but it's hot." For a moment he didn't speak, as if unsure this kindness was real. Then he said softly, "Thank you. I'm Kwame." His voice was low, carrying both pride and weariness. Zanelle smiled faintly. "I'm Zanelle. Eat before it gets cold." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his fingers tight around the box as if it were treasure. "I know," she replied, her eyes meeting his, "but I wanted to." Kwame's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, the kind that hinted at a man who hadn't smiled in a long time. "You've given me more than food tonight." She didn't understand what he meant, but his words stayed with her as she slipped back inside. The warmth of the kitchen hit her, but she felt a chill from the risk she'd just taken. If Mr. Dlamini found out, she could lose her job. Zanelle shook off the thought. She had only acted on what felt right. She couldn't know, neither of them could, that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, the restaurant buzzed with the usual chatter of clinking cups and shuffling feet, but Zanelle could feel the whispers that followed her. In the corner near the coffee machine, two waiters leaned close, their voices low but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "That man outside? He's nothing but a useless vagrant," one said, shaking his head. "Probably dangerous too. People like that only bring trouble." The other nodded, glancing at Zanelle. "If the manager finds out she's been feeding him, she'll be out on the street faster than she can blink." Zanelle kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear, but every word pressed against her like a warning bell. She carried plates to a table where her friend Namsa was clearing dishes. Namsa waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "Zanelle, what are you doing? I heard you gave him food last night. If Mr. Dlamini catches you, he won't think twice about firing you. You can't risk your job. You know how hard it is to find work." Zanelle met her friend's worried eyes, but didn't answer right away. She thought of Kwame's face when she handed him the food, the quiet gratitude, the way his hands had clutched the box as though it was more than just a meal. "Namsa," she finally said, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know why, but I feel like I can't just ignore him. There's something about him. It's different. I can't explain it." Namsa sighed, glancing toward the kitchen. "Different or not, you need to be careful. People will talk, and talking turns into trouble." All day the gossip swirled, each whisper twisting Kwame into someone dangerous, someone unworthy. But when Zanelle glanced out the window and saw him sitting quietly on the curb, not asking for anything, not even meeting the stares of strangers, she felt the same pull as before. She didn't see a vagrant. She saw a man carrying a weight no one else cared to understand. And no matter how loud the warnings became, she knew in her heart she wasn't going to turn away. That evening, after her shift, Zanele stepped outside to find Kwame sitting on the edge of the pavement, the last traces of daylight fading behind him. She hesitated, then walked over and sat beside him. For a moment, they said nothing, just listening to the hum of passing cars and the distant beat of music from a street vendor's radio. Finally, she broke the silence. "You don't look like someone who's always lived on the street," she said softly. Kwame let out a small breath, almost a laugh without joy. "I haven't," he replied. His eyes were fixed on the ground, but his voice carried a weight that made her lean closer. "I had a home once, a wife who smiled like the sunrise, a son who thought I could fix anything. We had plans, dreams that felt certain." He paused, his hands tightening as if holding onto something invisible. "But life doesn't care about your plans. One day it just takes." Zanele felt a lump rise in her throat. "What happened?" she asked gently. Kwame's gaze shifted to the road ahead, eyes distant. "A fire. It started small, then swallowed everything. My wife, my boy, gone before I could reach them." His voice cracked on the last word, and he quickly cleared his throat, forcing the rest back down. "After that, I couldn't stay. The house, the city, it all became a graveyard. I walked away from it all." He didn't look at her, but his words painted images she couldn't shake. She wanted to ask more, to piece together the whole story, but there was something in his expression that told her this was all he could give for now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Kwame finally looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "Don't be. The world moves on. People forget. I just haven't figured out how to yet." Zanele studied him in the fading light, and the gossip she'd heard earlier felt meaningless. He wasn't a vagrant to her anymore. He was a man carrying a grief so deep it had reshaped him, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to help carry some of that weight. The afternoon rush was in full swing, the restaurant filled with clattering plates and the scent of grilled meat. Zanele moved quickly between tables, her mind half on her work and half on the small box of warm food she had hidden under the counter. She had noticed Kwame outside again, sitting quietly on the curb, and planned to slip it to him when no one was looking. She waited for the perfect moment, then stepped toward the door, box in hand. But just as she reached the edge of the dining area, a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Zanele, what is that?" Mr. Dlamini's eyes were locked on her, his face twisting in suspicion. "It's just," she began, but he snatched the box from her hands and tore it open. His jaw tightened. "This is from our kitchen, and you're giving it away." To him? He pointed toward the window where Kwame sat, unaware of the scene unfolding. The restaurant went quiet. Customers glanced up from their meals, curious. The other staff froze, their eyes darting between her and the manager. "You think this is a charity?" Mr. Dlamini's voice grew louder, each word a lash. "Do you know how much food costs? Do you think you can take whatever you want?" Zanele felt her cheeks burn, her fingers curling into her apron. "I just didn't want to see him go hungry," she said quietly. But her voice trembled under the weight of so many watching eyes. Mr. Dlamini leaned closer, his tone cold. "If I catch you stealing from this restaurant again, you won't have a job to lose. You'll be out before you can blink. Do you understand?" She nodded, swallowing hard, the humiliation sinking deep. "Good. Now get back to work." He tossed the box into the trash, the sound of it hitting the bin echoing louder than anything else in the room. Zanele turned away, forcing herself to keep moving, but inside her chest a knot tightened. She had risked her job for a small act of kindness, and now every step felt heavier. Yet, even with the threat hanging over her, she knew she would do it again. Kwame sat on the same worn spot outside the restaurant, his posture relaxed but his eyes always moving. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another man waiting for spare change or a warm meal. But behind that quiet gaze, he was taking in everything. He watched how the waiters moved from table to table, who greeted customers with genuine smiles, and who only did it when the manager was looking. He noticed which staff worked hard and which ones cut corners. He saw how orders were delayed because the kitchen lacked coordination, and how Mr. Dlamini's temper often drove customers away. Every day, Kwame blended into the background, listening to conversations through the open windows. He caught bits of staff complaints about late pay, broken equipment, and unfair shifts. He watched Zanele carry heavy trays without a word of complaint, always stepping in to help a colleague or calm an impatient customer. He noticed the small kindnesses she offered, the way she handled problems without making a scene. He also saw the financial cracks forming, supplies being wasted, bills unpaid, customers not returning. Most people wouldn't see the pattern, but Kwame had an eye for details that came from years of running his own business in the past. He knew when something was bleeding money and when a place had potential. This restaurant had potential, but it was being strangled by poor leadership. Sometimes, when Zanele wasn't looking, Kwame's eyes softened as they followed her. He remembered the warmth in her voice when she first handed him food, the way she spoke without pity. That moment had stayed with him, but so had her strength under pressure. No one inside the restaurant imagined that the man they dismissed as a vagrant was quietly building a picture of the place, its flaws, its strengths, and the people worth keeping. He kept his thoughts to himself, never revealing the truth. While they saw a man down on his luck, Kwame knew he was far from helpless. He was waiting for the right moment, and when it came, everyone in that restaurant would see he was not who they thought he was. The lunch rush had barely begun when two men in crisp uniforms stepped through the door, flashing official badges. Health inspection, one announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. A ripple of panic spread through the staff. Mr. Dlamini's confident face paled, and the kitchen froze mid-motion. Everyone knew the place had its flaws. Leaky pipes, cluttered storage, and a fridge that sometimes failed. But no one expected an inspection without warning. The inspectors moved quickly, checking shelves, examining sinks, peering into corners. Each time they scribbled notes, the tension in the room grew heavier. A missing sanitizing label here, an uncovered container there. It was adding up fast. Mr. Dlamini barked orders at the staff, but his voice was more frantic than commanding. Zanele felt the weight of the moment, but didn't stop to think about herself or the threats hanging over her. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work, scrubbing counters, reorganizing shelves, clearing expired stock, and guiding the others to fix what they could on the spot. She kept her voice calm, directing coworkers without making them panic. Even when the inspectors frowned at a stack of unwashed dishes, she stepped in, washed, dried, and stored them in minutes. Some customers watched with curiosity, others with skepticism, whispering about the chaos. But as the minutes passed, they also saw Zanele moving with purpose, her energy contagious enough to pull even the laziest staff into action. Through the front window, Kwame sat in his usual spot, his eyes tracking every move. He saw how she didn't flinch when criticized, how she kept the kitchen running even while Mr. Dlamini stumbled over excuses. There was no self-pity in her, no sign of quitting, only determination. By the time the inspectors finished, the disaster had been pulled back from the edge. They still noted violations, but the immediate shutdown was avoided. As they left, a few customers clapped softly, and even the inspectors gave a brief nod to Zanele. Kwame leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. He'd seen strength in her before, but today it was undeniable. She wasn't just a waitress. She was the kind of person who could hold a place together when it mattered most. The morning started like any other. Zanele was setting tables, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen, when the door opened and a man stepped inside. She glanced up and froze. It was Kwame, but not the Kwame she knew. Gone were the worn clothes and tired shoes. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, polished shoes, and a crisp white shirt. His hair was neatly trimmed, his posture straight, and his eyes carried a quiet confidence. The staff stopped what they were doing, mouths slightly open. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is that him?" one waiter muttered. Even Mr. Dlamini stepped forward, his usual arrogance slipping into confusion. Kwame's gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on Zanele before turning to the rest. "Good morning," he said warmly, his voice steady but commanding. "I think it's time you all knew who I am." Mr. Dlamini frowned. "And who exactly are you?" Kwame smiled faintly. "I'm the new owner of this restaurant. I finalized the purchase last week after the previous owner decided to retire." The room went silent. He let the words settle before continuing. "I've been here for weeks, observing, learning, seeing how this place truly works. I needed to know the character of the people who keep it running." Gasps spread through the staff. Some exchanged uneasy glances, remembering their own behavior. Kwame's eyes moved from face to face. "I've seen dedication. I've seen laziness. I've seen kindness and cruelty. Every moment has told me exactly who belongs here." Finally, his gaze rested on Zanele, "And I've seen someone who showed compassion when she had nothing to gain, someone who worked harder than anyone else when it mattered most." Mr. Dlamini shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Kwame glanced at him briefly before turning back to the group. "This restaurant has potential, and we're going to make it great. But things are going to change, starting today." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Zanele's lips curved into the smallest, stunned smile. The man she'd once fed in secret was now standing in front of her, not as someone in need, but as the person who held the keys to the entire place. The room was still buzzing from Kwame's announcement when he turned to face Zanele fully. His expression softened, the authority in his stance melting into warmth. "Zanele," he said, his voice steady but filled with meaning. "The day you handed me that box of food, you didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet you still chose kindness. I will never forget that." Zanele blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. The staff stood frozen, all eyes locked on her. Kwame stepped closer. "This place needs people like you, people who care, not just about the job, but about the people around them. I want you to be the new manager. Starting today, your salary is doubled." Her mouth opened, but no words came. She could feel her heart racing, her mind struggling to catch up with what she was hearing. "And there's something else," Kwame continued. "I know about your brother. I've already arranged for his medical treatment to be fully covered. You won't have to choose between working late and caring for him anymore. Zanelle's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Just keep being who you are, he replied with a smile. Then his gaze shifted to Mr. Dlamini, whose face had grown pale. As for you, Kwame said, his tone now firm, your treatment of both staff and customers has been unacceptable. From today, you will take on a lower position. Maybe then you'll understand that leadership is about respect, not fear. The shock on Mr. Dlamini's face was almost audible in the silence that followed. The staff exchanged wide-eyed glances, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over them. Some even smiled at Zanelle, the quiet waitress who had just been handed the future she never imagined. Kwame extended his hand to her. She shook it, still in awe, knowing this moment had rewritten her life completely. What began as a simple act of compassion had brought her more than she ever dreamed: respect, opportunity, and the chance to give her brother a better life. The weeks that followed brought a new life to the restaurant. Zanelle, now wearing her manager's badge, walked through the dining area with quiet confidence. The once tense atmosphere was replaced with warmth and order. She trained the staff not just to serve food, but to serve with heart, greeting customers with genuine smiles, listening to their needs, and treating everyone, no matter how they looked, with dignity. Mistakes were met with guidance, not shouting, and even the shyest waiter began to open up under her encouragement. Kwame often sat at a corner table, watching her work with a proud smile. Their conversations moved beyond the restaurant, sharing ideas, dreams, and stories late into the evening. He valued her judgment, and she trusted his vision. They had become more than just employer and employee. They were partners in building something worth keeping. The business began to grow. Regular customers returned, bringing friends. New ones left with praise on their lips. Word spread that this was not just a place to eat, but a place where everyone felt welcome. One quiet afternoon, between the lunch and dinner rush, Zanelle stood near the window arranging menus when she noticed a boy outside. His clothes were thin, his hands tucked into his pockets, and his eyes fixed on the food inside. The sight pulled her back to that first evening with Kwame, the way he had stood in the same spot, hiding his hunger behind silence. Without hesitation, she walked into the kitchen, packed a warm meal, and stepped outside. The boy's eyes widened as she handed it to him. Here, she said gently. It's hot. Eat while it's still warm. He murmured a soft thank you, clutching the box the way Kwame once had. Zanelle watched him walk away, a small smile spreading across her face. She glanced back into the restaurant, where Kwame was watching from his table, nodding knowingly. In that moment, she understood fully. Kindness had a way of coming back, stronger than before. And as long as she was here, no one would be turned away hungry.